And what we're going to talk about today is not very much the number of the source, but the, the different variation between hot and cold light. And also understanding how color temperature uh, works into the language of light. And without going technical, and because we're gonna have a deep dive later, without going too technical, how we can take these concepts that we have learned so far and now start building up layers with color without confusing and without having um, a very complicated um, vocabulary, so that people can understand exactly what we're talking about. And as an example, what's the difference between warm and cold lights, and how human not reflect but react to each of them, and how designers and architects and so forth are using the warm and the cold to create different vibes, different uh, emotional response, and why, as a lighting designer, is it important, and what does it matter to us? What does it mean, and what all this knowledge has to do with us and in everyday environment, and how do we perceive things and how we see. um, you probably have noticed sometimes that you walk into a space and you feel warm and comfortable, and other space you feel bright and you feel crisp and energetic. Well, this has to do with the color temperature of the source by itself. um, and here we're not going to talk about natural light like the window. We're going to talk about artificial light. So um, I'm Robert Lanting. I'm a fractional senior lighting designer, and today this is what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to explore one of the most important concepts in lighting, as far as warm and cold. And when I started to demystify this, it became very obvious to me that I can have a conversation with a client and define exactly what they like, um, and not confuse them with different minute detail. As an example, somebody says, "Well, we're going to put a 3,000 degree Kelvin compared to a 3,200, or a 28 and a 4,000." All these numbers are have very um, meaningful signification, but for a client, they don't know. They don't know what's important, why we're putting this there, and then suddenly everything becomes 3,000 everywhere. And then we walk into a space and it's very flat because it doesn't have any depth, it doesn't have any motivation, it doesn't have anything that gets you into a different mood, because the color is all the same, the color of the lighting. And also, as we're going to look at, is that different color lighting, warm and cold, have different effect on materials. So by knowing that, and by knowing and working with the design and decorative team, you will find out that they will love you, because that perfect fabric they put on a wall, or these beautiful curtain, are enhanced with the color of the light, more than a certain other light that is probably cooler or warmer depending on which one it is. So again, the color is not just has effect on our mood, but also on the general ambiance of the place. So let's talk with let's talk about warm light. And what does warm light does is that it gives you this amber tone, similar to a sunset. So warmer light, sunset, amber, candlelight, fireplace. It's all in the same spectrum, and this is where you feel very warm. You feel very comfortable, and it's a very reassuring ambiance. Like right now here, it's very cool and crisp and white. So this would be more like a cool light. So it has a bluish tone. It's well, we have daylight here, so it's very similar to daylight, clear sky or midday sun. So this would be called what we call cool light. and and the idea here is that when you want a relaxing place, you're creating a place where you want people to spend time and not be, you will probably orient your lighting scheme around warm light. And then when you have a passage or you have a restaurant or you have a place which is more energetic, you will probably, most probably, orient your design intent into a cool lights. And this is the basic. If we could stop there, and we could also, that would be the end of the talk for today. But what I want to talk to you about is also what kind of human connection we do with the warm and the cold. And it's not only an emotional connection, it's a biological connection. And because we are evolving around these lighting cycle, the warm and the cold in nature, we will have different cycle happening with our body. As an example, in the morning, cooler daylight is very important. It stimulates your activity, makes you want to run, and so forth. And in the evening, well, everything starts to slow down. You have the warm sunset, and you have, those launch your signal of relaxation. You come home, you want to sit down in front of a fire. You want to decompress from the day. This is where your system needs to start to cool down. So the key thing here is that cool and warm are are enough to be able to communicate to your lighting designer. Now, let's keep building up on that story that I told you from the beginning. So we have directional lighting and we have general lighting, right? So if I tell you that I want directional lighting with a beautiful warm color on the wall to highlight this, orangey kind of red wall, you'll see that it goes together and it will give you this relaxation effect when you're going to be walking into that room. On another hand, if I said, okay, I want some very directional, cool light that are lighting up these beautiful glass sculpture, and they are in the bluish and the greenish scale of color, then you will understand that these will pop and they'll be very crisp and they're very exciting. Like, wow, they'll be very strong statement. So again, without talking about product, without talking about degree, Kelvin, without anything that could be confusing for a client, we can start to describe a space by adding the cooler and warmer to our sources distribution, so that now we can start to have a dialogue that is more and more complete and more precise to work with the rest of the design team, so that they understand what kind of message you want to be transmitting, and this will also happen naturally, because now what you're going to be talking about is something that they understand. And when you talk to the design team or the client explaining your concept in warm and cold concept, and then you talk to the fixture manufacturers and warm and cold concept, and then you talk to the distributor with warm and cold concept, and even the electrician. Now everybody's are on the same page, and when they're going to be adjusting, because some of the source have automatic adjustment on them. You can go warm or cold, and they have different effect, not different effect, different degree of coolness and warmness. But they, at least they'll be able to do a pre adjustment that will work. And of course, when we talk about cool light or warm light, we're talking also about the effect that the color has on people. And this is the most untapped, I would say, the untapped. Even though we hear a lot about human centric and all of that, color effect on people is the most untapped market there is, because when you start to talk about color, people see red, green, and blue. They don't see the nuance before warm and cold. And once you start to explain and educate them on the cold, they'll be more alert, they'll be more focused, they'll be more productive in a cool environment. And on the other hand, when you're doing a nice, warm, welcome area, they'll be relaxing. It'll be very, it will be able to have a bit more intimacy. You feel comfortable, and all of that are items that we don't talk about, and that are very hard to explain when you are set at 3,000 degrees. One of the most traumatizing experience I had, I was with a sales guy, and he said, well, right off the bat, everything's at 3,000 degrees. And I was flabbergasted, because there's no room for creating anything in there. Everything's going to be like this. So there's no enhancement of the warm color or more and warm and cold, because if you have fabric that are in the green and the blue and the cooler spectrum of the color, you really want to have enhance it so that they don't look brownish, because you have a warm source lighting them. You want to have a cool source that's going to make them pop, make them crisp, and so forth. And same thing like when you do different area of the house. When we want to have like a warmer light when we do, let's say, a living room, bedroom, dining room. We want to have these area very comfy, nice warm lights, and some of the source, the manufacturers of LED source have understand, and they say they go warm to dim, dim to warm, or whatever terminology is. And yes, it does, it does feel part of the function, but now you have to compromise with the level of light, which, if you put it full blast, you have a cool kind of light, and then when you start dimming, you have the warm. And sometimes you really need the light, the amount of light in the dining room, as an example. You don't really want to dim the light to have them warm. You want it to be warm. You want people to relax. You want to have a little bit more intimacy, and that's what warm lighting does. And then and the same thing for the not the commercial, but the cool part, right? We have a pool area. We want to have it cooler light, and so forth. And landscape, cooler light makes the greenery pop, makes everything look very sharp and crisp. And same with commercial. When we do commercial lighting design, it's not one for all, because again, we have art, we have color, we have furniture, we have fabric, we have carpet, we have all kind of finish, and different area also where we execute different tasks. And an office space is different than a restaurant, And the idea is that one will be probably a little cooler and a restaurant will probably be a little warmer. But again, you may have some beautiful art. You may have a collection of specific. You may have greenery, and warm lighting on a green wall looks, it's not the optimal lighting. Not that it doesn't work, but it's not the optimal. So what we're looking at here is the idea that once we start talking with the design team, when we start highlighting what space is which, and we start to elaborate on what kind of lighting effect we want, then we can add in the same sentence, is it a cooler or warmer area? And that opens sometimes a very animated discussion, because now we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about feelings, we're talking about emotion, we're talking about personality, we're talking about, like, what's that space gonna be? And you're setting up standards that are becoming easy to understand for everybody, so that we can push in one direction and we can be very, very clear and precise. Um, and when you start thinking about the overall composition, now you will see that some area will be a little warmer, some will be cooler, and that 3,000 or that all lit up the same doesn't work for any area, even an office space, even a restaurant, even etc. Residential is obvious, but it has to be said, because if you don't, even electrician, when they come in, the last people on the chain, they'll adjust the light wherever they think it should be, and that's not their job. Their job is to say, okay, this is a warm area, you put it at 2,800. This is a cool, you put it at 3,000, 4,000, and this is going to be like that for the whole project. So when they understand that the lighting is also following the natural cycle of life, as an example, like that, the morning we have a sunrise, and that goes when we start talking about human-centric lighting and lighting control system. This is where normally the electrician, they get out, because they're not equipped to do programming. Some general contractor, some not general, but electrical contractor have control department within, but very few. So now you have a new player coming in. You have an audio video guy, and him too needs to understand that the lighting has been taught, and no matter what he does, it has to follow this program. So you may want to spend some time. You may want to share some documentation with him on, okay, this is the color scheme of the house, and they're going to say, what color scheme? Well, there is a color scheme. There's area where when in the morning we want a sunrise, so that means that we want to have warmer color. During the day we may have it cooler, and then at sunset we may want it warm again. So the lighting design will follow a path, and because we can do it with the lighting control, with the new technology, the LED, and and also the type of fixtures, it gives you the opportunity to give a cycle to your house. And more people have their home office, they work from home, they stay at home, they entertain more. You will feel that difference of having, like this cycle of lights, that you start warm, cooler, and warmer in the evening, uh, and 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 that is basically the how could I say, the natural cycle of light. Now, I mentioned to you lighting control, I mentioned to you color, I mentioned to you also different time of the day. And the early days, the LED totally changed the vocabulary of what lighting control was, because suddenly we were dealing with electronic component that respond differently than incandescent or fluorescent or any traditional source, and also that had way more control than just a light bulb. So that was the introduction of the red, green, and blue. Not that we didn't have red, green, and blue in incandescent, or because stage lighting, like I told you, I started doing lighting on stage, and we were mixing the colors, and we were mixing warm and cold, and learning all kinds of theory. And what happened is that the red, green, and blue theoretically was give you the perfect light because the mixture of the three give you a white light. Well, that that was a big lie, because when we started mixing LED that were white, green, red, green, and blue, what happened is that um, we had a few factors that were not accounted for, and the color that was coming out was horrible, and it's still horrible. If you take red, green, and blue, you start mixing it with the different three different source on one wall, it'll probably be a white that is very cold, very bluish, and you would say, well, technically it should be the perfect light. Technically, yes. But because of any variation of those electronic components, it gives you a variation on the end result. So if you have a red that has a certain amount of red compared to a green that has a certain amount of green, and a blue that has the certain amount, if they're not perfectly balanced and one of them has less and more, your output is going to be different. You're going to have the mix of the three, but since they're not perfectly balanced, your result will be white, but it will not be a perfect white. And here was born the red, green, and blue and white. Then they decided to add a white, and that white could have been cool white or warm white, depending on your choice. And now we have red, green, blue, and warm white, cool white. So we have the whole spectrum of color that could be translated into a perfect white. Perfect. There's nothing like perfection, but at least can give you a whole spectrum of color and a spectrum of white too, from warm white to cool white. And I don't know if that makes sense, but this is now, how light LED evolved. And earlier I was telling you that the LED brought in a brand new way of talking about light, because also the way that we were controlling light in the past were not as efficient as LED. Um, there was It was very rare that you could, well, basically impossible to control the color of one source. Meaning that if you had a one incandescent bulb, that was it. With an LED, you could have an LED that has three chips inside, and then you could shift the different colors. So the same source, if you take an incandescent, would go from 0 to 100. The same source with RGB would go 16 million colors. It would go to the whole rainbow. So on one flash, you had a white flash, and then you could have a flash that is red, a flash that is blue, the flash that is green. This one would always stay white. So the vocabulary expanded, and the effect and the way we would describe and the way we would have, like you can have now, since they were semiconductor and they were electronic component, then you can have them chase, you can have them skip a color, you could have them a whole array of new word happen when the RGB LED came into the market. Now, at first, it was more like a decoration and like a novelty, like, oh yeah, everybody had LED and so forth. The entertainment industry was really strong in it. And the reason was simple is that now you could have way less projector. And of course, as the technology evolved, it became more and more. And then the government and the legislation start banning certain source. And then they said, well, you got to shift. You're gonna, and the whole market now it is what it is because of that's the natural evolution of the source. Is it the best one? Well, that's not what it is. That's this conversation is about. But it's just an evolution. Like we start with the incandescent, we went to the compact fluorescent, we went to the high intensity discharge source, and then we went back to the compact fluorescent, and then now we're onto the LED, and now we have, we're about 10, 15 years, maybe 15, 20 years into the process, and they're still getting better and better and better. So LED, RGB, warm white, cool white. What does that give us as a lighting designer beside headaches? Because what's happening is that, first of all, when you talk about color to anyone, they have this, disco club or this idea that it's going to look like a pizza. And they are right, because most people that sell RGB, red, green, and blue LED, don't know nothing about light. All they want is an order. They just want to sell something, and the control for them is very, very, very limited. So there's no way that you can, you have pre-programmed colors and you have pre-programmed sequence of lights, and that's it. So unless you have a nightclub or you have something, a storefront of a store, you will have, random pattern, and it doesn't really matter because, it needs, the only thing it needs is just to create an effect. Now, this kind of effect, when we're talking about commercial or architecture, residential, commercial or residential architecture, it has a different meaning, because now we have a solution that sometimes are way overkilling for the use that we want. And I'm going to say that even if I was a very I always been an advocate of color in architecture, and there was also, I was very prudent, and I was also putting it in an area where it would have the most impact and it was the most needed and wanted, not everywhere. So what happened with the RGB is that it became overwhelming, and it became almost a no-no or a bad reputation to use it, because there's no limit. And funny enough, when I sell a concept, or when I tell a client about colors and we talk about color temperature, one of the things that I'm very, very prudent about is that I make sure that they understand that it's not everywhere, and where it's going to be, it's going to be useful, and it's going to be useful for a specific reason. If they entertain, if there's children in the family, is anything that will, even senior people love colors, but not everywhere. So, and I will also put it as part of a program, and also most of the time be able to control locally with your cell phone or a little remote control, so that you can add more or less color in the space. So, and I will also use RGB to sometimes highlight architecture in commercial, to create so event lighting, brand identity, dynamic, architectures, and we got to be very careful because nowadays we see more and more LED screens, and that also become part of another topic that we'll talk about, which is more like light pollution. So when we're talking about an interactive environment, that it is commercial or residential, we're talking about control, we're talking about programming, we're talking also about preset, meaning that sometimes you want people to be able to control certain amount or certain aspect of the lighting, but maybe not all of it. So some of it will be kept at a certain level, at a certain color because of the branding, and some of it will be totally, random and be used for event or for something in special. And the same thing for I talked to you about warm white, cool white. The warm white, cool white, what's happening now is that we can also talk about what LED technology brought is that they brought tunable white, meaning that you can go from a cool LED to a warm LED. And in your head, you think, how can you do that? Well, there is a certain amount of hardware that is required to do that, meaning that you need specific LED that are combining the cool and the white in the same chip. Then you need special power supply, meaning that they can also be controlled separately. Then you need a controller that can tune between the cold and the warm. And then, of course, you have presets, and then you have, be able to dim or put them full on. So this concept of tunable white is a bit more sophisticated than anything else, than just normal on and off or dimmable white. But it has all the benefits of working on the circadian rhythm. It has many application in healthcare, office, schools, and education, even wellness studio. It's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to chiropractors, and when I walked in, I looked at their light. Half of them were burned, and they had these lights that were in their face. And I said, just imagine the benefit, the psychological benefit that it could bring if you just start tuning the color. If you could have nice color, if you have warm, white, RGB, and so forth. So having the possibility, brings other benefits that are not necessarily accountable. Because if you talk to the accounting and you say, well, the lighting system will be 100 grand, and they're like, well, we can replace these old fixtures for 10. Why would I pay 90,000 more? Well, it has to have more than just the fixture, and it has to have more than just, it's going to look pretty. That's where you have a program. That's where you start, talking about benefits. It's where you start talking about human-centric curve. That's where you start having a bit more thought about the patient than the wallet. And all of this is not, there's nothing wrong with just replacing the fixtures and putting it there. It's just that what is it that you want to achieve? If it's just a sausage factory, you get people in, you treat them, you take them out, it's fine. But don't forget that the neighbor and today's economy, people are focused on the experience. People want to have more for their dollars. People want also to be part of something that is giving them a feeling that they are part of a tribe. So all these emotional tie that you're creating with the clients are not very accountable. You cannot really put a dollar sign on, but over the time, repeated business, referral, also wellness of the client, because when they're in, they see some of the color change. They have different lighting effects. They have general diffuse. They have highlights. They have all kinds of things happening indirectly to them. They have an amazing feeling, and they're looking forward to go into treatment, compared to another place where they feel they're just a number or taking advantage of. Because when you sit down and you see that they're half of their lights, or there's a couple burn light and the color and some are flickering, you're like, well, they don't give me a discount because some of the light don't work, or they don't give me a discount because this place looks like shit, right? And for the same price, I can go to a place where I walk in and I like it. I feel good, and I really feel the benefits of this lighting. And then people talk about it too. Like the therapists are going to say, well, this is our new lighting system, so that you don't have attention. And while you're daydreaming about whatever, because you're traveling into a different dimension with the lighting, and that looks weird. That sounds weird, but it is what it is. So you don't have attention on the space, and the practitioner can apply and do his treatment, and you're not focused on whatever that's happening right now. That you're more like in another dimension, helping, enjoying yourself. Wow, that's deep. But that's lighting for me. Again, it's not something that we hear, and that's what I told you, that I would bring you what I think, what I believe, what I explore, what I read, and what I share with other lighting designers. The human biology and comfort of it is way more than just lighting, normal lighting. And when you start to understand that, you understand that brightness, efficiency, visibility are all very, very important concepts. But knowing and being able to modulate light into warm and cold at certain time of the day will naturally bring your body into these different states, and will naturally make you more productive and relax a little bit more at the end of the day, and will naturally keep you more healthy. And when I say health, it's a very bold statement, and because it's very hard to monitor. I mean, every time I go into scientific journal and I start pulling article, I see lots of reference, a lot of this, a lot of that, but we're not trying to do miracle. We're just trying to make the human experience better, have better visibility, have systems that are more efficient, that the experience overall, the well-being experience is more than a place that doesn't have it. So basically, we are enhancing the experience of the space. Same thing when we do hospitality, or we do residential, or we do just a restaurant or a shopping experience. Color temperature will always be something that is also viewed as an expense, and it's not a major in today's economy. It's not a major driver as people think. when you think, of course, white static is the cheapest. No doubt about that. You can go to Home Depot, you can buy some lights, a 12 pack for $50. But you have technology for $50. Now, when it's for, I don't know, your little cabana where your lawnmower is in the garden, it's fine because you're gonna open it. You take your stuff, you put gas in your little tractor, and then you got out and you go mow your lawn and you bring it back and you don't hit the wall. And that's about the basic usage of a light that. And I would never recommend to have tunable white light. But when it's a place where you have you're achieving or you're doing some task, now tuning white is something that is moderate cost. And of course, when you're talking about the whole spectrum, uh, you will have a higher cost. So basically, by establishing the hierarchy of the space, the different space, your budget allocation will go like that. And then also, what you're going to find out is that by allocating different account money into you will and faces, and you'll have a better result and more feedback than just lighting up everything flat. And overall, over time, when you let's say you want to sell or you want to hire people, or you are I don't know, you're doing events. This investment that you did on your lighting system will pay for itself, because people will come and they say, well, we don't know what's special about this place, but every time we go there, we have more fun, or we have a better experience, or we will pay more money because we've been looking at 50 different practice or 5 different practice and they all look like shit, and when we walk into yours, there's something different and we cannot put our finger on it, but we feel that's the vibe we want to transmit to our clients. So again, the real impact is very, very hard to monitor, but you'll find out very soon that after a while you get all this return, and lighting is a good part of it. So what other data can data control that we can integrate with this color changing, this color temperature? Well, that could be hook up to a system, a centralized system, and we could have sensor that are monitoring the daylight whenever it's cloudy, whenever it's sunny, whenever it's dark, whenever it's sunrise. It will adjust. Also, there's a time clock from different time of the day. We can have occupancy sensor. It could be connect to an occupancy sensor, and then so that when nobody's there, it could be at 50% and so forth. And also be part of this IoT smart building, the smart city that does. In Asia, there's a lot of exterior light show over a whole series of high-rise building, that each of them are controlled in groups, and that becomes, when you're with a ship or you're on the other side of the shore, you see these as major billboard. So again, there is no real limit on the integration of lighting and controls, and as long as it becomes part of a wellness design, it also has as benefits. It has, like an amazing energy management functionality. So you by modulating different colors, by controlling them separately or having them on different program, you can modulate your energy. You can have less, and you can have more when it's not peak time, less during the peak time. Um, and this smart environment, now makes you, well, first save money, but also gives you a new perspective on your space. Wow, that was something. Um, so again, to add what this modulating color and dealing with warm and cool, if we go back to the basic, is again to enhance and to describe the lighting experience you want to have in the space. And part of your story as a designer is to add these two little words. Do we want it warmer or do we want it cooler? And it's not about the fixture. It's about the feeling and also the environment that you're creating. So I hope this helped you a little bit. And again, not about lighting perception. It's not about fixtures. It's not about just be able to describe if we have a directional or a general diffuse, then if it's going to be warm or cold. And then eventually we're going to start talking, do we want a fixture that lights up? Do we want a fixture that's on ground in the floor? Do we want walls cones? Do we want to have recess? And again, the story gets clearer and clearer, and we have more detail to the story, the lighting story, and then it's easier to achieve a specific result because now we can talk clearly. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about fixtures, and then also I got amazing things to tell you about fixtures. And next week, um, and next Monday, I'm going to talk to you about the difference between brightness and the quality of light. So hope that everything you